I made the number one mistake.
Most business owners I worked with had not done like full-fledged planning.
So welcome to a very different type of episode. Today, I'm Krystyn Harrison, and I'm sitting down with my husband and co-founder, Matt Harrison. And we are so excited to share a little bit of our founding story of how we and why we started Exit Horizon. And one of the things that we are doing as co-founders of this business is starting to build our company to sell. And we're going to be openly sharing our framework, our playbook with you on how we choose to do that. So here's the thing. There are countless resources out there on how to start a business, scale a business. But we have found, especially in the Canadian market, there's very little information and knowledge on how to actually exit until you go through one yourself. I myself have had my own exit, which was frankly a very painful experience. It was not glamorous. I learned a lot through that. Matt has sold privately owned businesses in M&A, and he's seen a lot of owners who arrive at the deal process underprepared. And I won't steal his thunder. I'll let him speak to his experience. And today is really about kind of unpacking how we're choosing to build our company, the playbook that we want to share with founders across Canada, and a little bit of our story and Matt's story and how he arrived here from a boutique M&A firm in Toronto to the startup world, which I don't know if you would have thought you'd come here.
We're going to get your story too, right?
You're absolutely going to talk about my story, including the mistakes, the many mistakes that I made when trying to run my own sale process. So let's get into it. Today, it's going to be fairly personal. And I think we're both a little nervous, but excited. Shall we get into it?
Now let's do it.
Okay. All right, here we go. So Matt, let me introduce you to everyone that is listening.
Sure.
You are my husband and my co-founder. We are building this business together. You helped build this content studio over our last 2 weeks together.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had a unique insight that you brought to me. We were looking at different opportunities to invest in our time, our own money, our resources. And we had about 100 ideas on the table before we chose to build Exit Horizon. For you, what was it that kind of was the aha moment on why you chose to invest your time, your money, your resources to build this thing with?
We had a shared notes of like 100 different business ideas of things we could start. Some of them were really terrible. Some of them were pretty decent. Some of them are still there. Exit Horizon was not on that list. So why did we start Exit Horizon? How did we come to the creation of it? So while I was doing M&A, most business owners I worked with had not done like full-fledged planning. It was mostly some major event causing them to need to go through a sale process. I had clients who were going through a cancer's journey, had clients who, semi-jokingly or not, were saying their spouse was going to divorce them. And so they were calling us on the Monday to start the process, which, was unfortunate, but sometimes that's a reality. Sometimes there was some disagreement with partners and they're trying to figure out what their next steps were. And there was just a unfortunate lack of planning as to when they wanted to sell the business, what they wanted to get out of it. And that was both events and then also from like a tax preparation side of things as well. I had one client who they didn't do tax planning. And I remember sitting in front of the accountant with them. And it's like, hey, they could have saved a couple $100,000 in taxes and not sent it to the CRA. And just seeing the face of that business owner who'd been, the CEO there for many, many years, it's like, oh, it's not a good thing. There's got to be a better way to prepare business owners for this, as well as some of your personal experiences, which I'm sure you'll touch on a little bit later. And so putting that all together, this is supposed to be like the ultimate achievement for entrepreneurs, and being part of that journey and knowing that there could be better exits for business owners was really one of the main drivers of doing this, of getting business owners ready, and also just thinking about that life after business for them. For most business owners, they talk about playing golf and that sort of thing post-sale, but what is it that's going to drive you? We all need to have a passion. We all need to have a project. We need something to work on, to pour ourselves into, and thinking about that before you have 40 hours a week plus in your schedule.
Empty calendar.
Exactly. Is a really important thing to do, and starting to pull that forward and figure it out. Where do you want to spend your time? Who do you want to spend it with? What's your legacy going to be? What does it mean to you?
And you came to me and you basically said, Krystyn, I've seen this problem. I've seen this pain. There is just a limited amount of knowledge that you can access that isn't behind like M&A closed doors or deal room doors, or, where can we go? Where can entrepreneurs go to actually learn how to do this stuff? And in my own experience as a founder, I had to piece it together from podcasts, from reading different books that are out there. And it felt advisors as well that I was fortunate enough to have in my network. But there wasn't a single place where I could go to understand how to build a more valuable version of my company and what it actually means to go through an exit. And I actually thought an exit was just a transaction.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it can be, but it's a lot more than that. Most business owners don't think about the amount of time an exit takes. And as you know, that's one of the conversations we often have with business owners of just, okay, when do you plan to exit? And then talking about all the factors that get into it. And so an exit is a multi-year process, especially if you want to optimize it. I was speaking to an M&A firm a couple of weeks ago, and they told me the average length of a transaction for them is about 9 to 10 months. In my experience, 6 months was like a fantastic, super well run transaction. I've had a transaction where it was closer to 2 years than 1 year. And so when you start thinking about that's just the sale process, that's not even your transition afterwards. That's not the plan that goes into it ahead of time. It's a multi-year process to think through, and it's important to start to understand when you want to exit on your terms.
So let's do the exit timeline math because I
Sure.
know that's been really helpful with our advisory clients just around thinking about the exit as a project. And once you make a project, you start to work backwards from a due date and you start to set milestones. And then it becomes very real and you're forced to actually make thoughtful decisions about what to do versus not to do.
Yep.
And oftentimes there's so many different things you could do that I find it's harder to actually flip it and say, what shouldn't we do to build this company for exit? So let's actually do this on ourselves. So if we were to start today and say, we want to build a more valuable version of Exit Horizon
hmm
and get it to an exit in 5 years. Let's just say my dream exit date is 5 years from now. It's September, 5 years from now. What is that work back? What does that look like?
All right. So September 2030. First question is, in 5 years, do you want to be entirely out of your business, or do you want to have sold your business in 5 years?
Interesting
Because those are two
distinction.
different dates.
Walk me through that.
So if you're going to sell your business, that could be like the closing date of the transaction. So closing September 2030. That's wonderful, except we might have a 1 year or a 2 year or a 3 year transition after that. Depends on what the new owners might want. Depends on how much we've removed ourselves personally from the business. Let's say hypothetically, this takes off. We become, uh, you know, we're on a lot of social media. We're driving a lot of that engagement. It might be a longer tail as a result of that, a longer transition period, because the new owners would view us as a core
Core.
part of the business.
Right.
Ideally, you want that to be a year or less. Most business transitions, I would say, are probably a year or less. But if you're coming into it and you're saying, I'm the number one salesperson at my company and you're the owner and CEO, that's not a great thing for your business or for yourself.
So I want to be out. I think we want to be out 5 years from now,
Yep.
September 2030. Let's work backwards and sort of break that down.
Sure. So let's say we give ourselves a 1 year transition just to stay on, and we're going to plan this so that we're pretty far removed from day to day operations. And so 1 year in like an advisory consultancy role. Okay. So that's now down to 4 years because we have 1 year of the transition. Now we've got about a year, let's call it, of that M&A transaction. So pre-planning plus that 9 to 10 months. Let's take our average. So now we're down 2 years. So we have 3 years to build the business before we're going to go to market and sell it. So now we've got 3 years to build value in the company. And as you know, in our advisory roles, when we're talking with business owners, now all of a sudden it's how can we maximize the business value, and how can we reduce owner dependency and those critical dependencies on other team members, staff, software, whatever it might be. And so for us at that point now, it's okay, we got 3 years to build. What are our value cases? What are those specific business cases we can look at to build value in the company, to increase revenues, increase profitability? Are there new markets we want to enter? Are there new products we want to offer? And really a holistic view on the company of what can we accomplish in 3 years? And one of the key things when you're doing that is also making sure you prove the value of those
Yeah.
cases. And that's one of the real critical things is showing, hey, we've done this for 12 months. It's growing at probably, if it's an early product, 100% year over year. We think this is the continued value of it. And trying to get some of that upside potential on the growth story from it, as well as showing, hey, this actually works. It's not just this hypothetical hockey stick of growth that you're going to show on a confidential information memorandum, a SIM, that info book that you put in front of buyers during a sale process. Actually proving value. We've done it. We're doing it. It's growing.
It's showing up in our P&L.
Is much more valuable than we could have done it, We should have done it, but we never did it.
There's the potential. And that, in my experience, having raised money for my last startup, my tech company, that was the difference in terms of venture capital. Yes, you were showing results, but you were really betting on the future of the company. Could this be $100 million bet, right?
Yep.
Whereas here, you're actually looking more at what are the results of the business? As a buyer, could I actually replicate those results?
Mm-hmm.
Do I see enough in your data room or deal room, which is where you house all of your processes, your playbooks, your P&Ls, your balance sheet, et cetera, to prove that those
Yep.
results were achieved and repeatable?
Mm-hmm.
Because that effectively, as we've been building together, is where the risk is reduced. If there's all of that in place, it's lower risk, which means higher multiple, you get more value out of your business, the
Mm-hmm.
lower the risk is, the perceived risk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, risk is a big part of it. Multiples vary industry to industry, so that's not necessarily in our control.
Yeah.
But where we fall in that range of multiples that a business typically is for us, that is somewhat within our control,
Right.
and that's where we can start to make those decisions and drive that forward.
And that's not going to be the same for every industry. So let's talk about the space that we're in. And we're going to be very open and transparent with all of you as we're sharing our journey and sharing exit stories and advisor perspectives in the Canadian market, what we're learning and what we're applying to our own business. And so one of the things that we learned as we started was, you know what? Our business is not very saleable as a consulting business. It's just the two of us. Yet is the key word. Yeah. And from that, given we have this 3-year window to build, one of the questions was, well, how do we scale this business beyond Matt and Krystyn?
Mm-hmm.
And we've built a phenomenal, wonderful client base in our value advisory firm that's growing, but it's a lot more difficult to scale the two of us than it is to approach something else. And so that is partly why we've launched this membership community. And our hope is to really bring that knowledge and playbook to founders out there to be thinking systematically about building their company.
Mm-hmm. And one of the
Right.
key things for us as a part of this is you've gone through a journey of trying to sell a business and doing it yourself. And I'm sure we'll touch on that a little bit later on.
We should go there.
Sure. But really, launching this community is very much about helping more business owners get optimal results. There is no reason that business owners should not have complete tax planning done well ahead. Like at least, the 2 years is kind of what the CRA guidelines are for a lot of those purifications of trust and such. But it should be done well ahead of time. And for business owners to start thinking of, to put it in the simplest terms, how is a buyer going to view my business?
Yeah.
Not how is Matt going to view my business and how do I want to run it from, a lifestyle perspective? But how is a buyer going to look at my business? How is a buyer going to look at my systems? How is a buyer going to look at my people, my processes, my technology? And how are they going to value it? What decisions should I make if I were a buyer looking at my?
And I honestly feel like between the two of us, when we do our planning, I feel like there's like a little buyer on my shoulder that's sort of like, how would they? And it's kind of like a weird metaphor, but I'm building it very differently with you versus when I was building Prosper, which was a tech company that you very much were a part of on the side as my spouse. I was thinking about the mission and the people we were helping and which is wonderful and extremely important. But what I was missing was thinking about some of the business fundamentals around like, okay, is this transactional revenue or is this a recurring revenue model? Do I have the right sales motion to grow the enterprise pipeline that is not just relying on me, the founder, as the number one source of referral? Because that means I'm probably going to have a longer transition period given it's so dependent on me. So thinking super different. I feel like it's changed the way we've built this, and bringing Andrea on board as well has been really exciting just to kind of get her pattern recognition from her own exits. And honestly, I think we're just so pumped to share this knowledge with the founders who want to do the work, and we're going to be doing it with them.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things, and if any of our clients are listening, they'll laugh because they probably heard this, is you never know what conversation's happening behind closed doors.
Yeah.
And so in a boardroom of a strategic buyer or financial buyer, what are they interested in? And sometimes it's dollars and cents. Sometimes it's purely strategic value. And sometimes it is, intrinsic value and community and what people have built as well. So value goes lots of different ways from a buyer perspective, especially on the strategic side of things.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So let's dive into my exit story.
Sure.
So Prosper was a ride you were on. It was 7+ years ago now. Gosh, it's crazy to think about. And we were on a mission, just for context, to democratize access to executive coaching so that anyone could log in with their mobile device and get access to an incredible coach in their pocket, so to
Mhm.
speak. We raised a few $1 million. We built out a team. We built the most beautiful product that was picked up and rewarded. But what we didn't do was a first time founder mistake. We didn't focus on distribution first. We focused on perfecting the product before we really sold it. So, key message, sell, then build would be my recommendation. But given that we had a consumer brand that we launched, we pivoted to enterprise a little bit too late. We had some amazing logos like RBC, Lululemon, but we had a long sales cycle to ride those out. And we hit cash crunch after cash crunch. And I think that a lot of founders out there can relate to this moment
Mm.
where you are literally contingency planning every single day, trying to figure out a way to survive. And we could not find a path that would really sustain ourselves from a cash flow perspective.
And out of
Um,
curiosity, what was your decision-making process on what you were going to execute upon?
at that moment,
Yeah.
you have to look at your decision point, your decision set. And one option was sell more enterprise, keep going, grow the business. You've got great logos. Let's go. I didn't, unfortunately, really have an established sales function that wasn't me. I was so key and critical to that process that when I had to then go out and fundraise during the exact same time to bring more cash into the business through fundraising, not through customers, which is another thing, by the way. I would definitely recommend building a little leaner
Mm.
and financing the business through your customers versus investors if you can. Um, I was so focused. I was out in SF. I was fundraising. I was trying to raise the next round that I took my eye off the ball, frankly, on my sales role. And there wasn't enough focus and attention there while I was away. And we were not successful in raising that next round. Our closest competitor closed $150 million during the exact few weeks I was there. It's very difficult to defend, especially in software. And so then you kind of go, okay, some clear doors have been closed. What is my decision set now? And you're constantly looking at what your optionality is. And at that point, it was very clear to me that we needed to find a home for the technology and for the brand and the value that we had created. At the time, I had no idea what that looked like. And so I ended up creating a list of 50 plus corporate dev leaders. I didn't even know what corporate development meant, by the way. I just thought, oh, okay, now I'm learning. You're learning all the time, right?
Mhm.
And so I found these folks who that function in large companies is essentially, as you know, Matt, responsible and accountable for making acquisitions to grow the business through inorganic means, which really just means we're going to grow by buying revenue, by buying cash flow from other businesses and or buying a strategic reason like technology or team or what have you.
Mhm.
So I made the number one mistake. You imagine what it is? You already know.
What was it?
I ran my own process. And that gives you very little leverage. It's like trying to sell your own house on your own. And there's a lot of emotion tied to it as well. And so it's very difficult to be impartial. And so I tried to run a process. I didn't know what I was doing. You were not an M&A at this time.
It was pre-M&A for me. Yeah.
You were at RBC. So this was totally kind of a new thing. And ultimately what it led to was we found a buyer. We had one expression of interest that was drafted. It was a 7-figure deal. It would have been life-changing money for our family.
Mhm.
And it all fell apart.
Yep.
It all fell apart. And I remember conversations with the board who were incredibly supportive and it was just this emotional ride while also trying to run the business and grow it. So you can imagine, very difficult to do it all at once, almost like having 2 to 3 full-time jobs.
So if I may, my
Yeah.
experience when doing M&A was, this turns into maybe not a full-time job for business owners, but it is certainly like a large portion of their calendar, even if it's just mind share for a part of the process. Due diligence is definitely the most intensive from like a time perspective for business owners. Uh, but you were running the business, you were running the sales process, uh, and you had no outside assistance whatsoever on it,
No.
which I don't think we would recommend to any business owner on a go forward basis. Having somebody run a process for you, I think the firm I was at, we always thought it was something around 1,200 hours plus
That
to
sounds
get
right.
a transaction done. And to put that onto a business owner on top of running day to day operations is just way too much. One of the things that I don't think every business owner realizes until they're in the moment is you're being evaluated both individually and as a business all the way until the money's in the bank,
Yeah.
until that check is cleared or the wire transfer has
To
cleared.
dance, eh?
It is, because
Yeah.
anything that happens can potentially lead to like a renegotiation at the 11th
What are some
hour.
examples that you've seen?
One of the examples that I can remember is a buyer was looking at a business and they felt that staff was underpaid by 10%. And so they wanted to do an adjustment to earnings because they were saying, hey, we're going to have to increase your payroll by 10%, which is going to negatively impact the EBITDA, or earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization,
Mouthful.
uh, it is a mouthful, M&A terms, which is typically businesses are sold on a multiple of EBITDA. And they were going to negatively impact EBITDA by, I think it was somewhere around like $200,000. The company was selling for, I think it was close to a 10x multiple. So you're talking $2 million change in the,
Sizable.
yeah,
Wow.
which is like quite substantial for the business owners. And so you are constantly being evaluated, and that's more of like a diligence thing coming up. But the closest example I have to that question right there.
Well, I did not go through 1,200 hours. We ended up in a place where I had very little negotiating power because I was working with these folks, and many of them, that one LOI, for example, their focus was let's continue to see over the next 3 to 6 months. And the business did not have that level of runway to
Mhm.
really ride that out and bet on that one path. And so we made a very difficult decision to pursue a path where we sold the assets for not very much. So in the end, we ended up pursuing an asset sale of what we had in the business, which was our mobile platform, our brand, our website, all of that. And it went to live on. My co-founder went with that company as well. I was able to move on from that moment. And I learned a tremendous amount through that experience. But if I look back at it now, knowing what I know, having spent time in private equity, understanding how value can actually be created systematically. And for you, having sold businesses and thought a lot about maximizing value and what that means, um, we're building very differently. And, one of the hardest parts for me emotionally, and I'm sure you saw a lot of this, I'm curious how you saw it as an advisor, but as a founder, I had to do a lot of unwinding of my identity from Prosper, from that business, and redesigning kind of the next path and chapter. And unfortunately, I didn't have 2 to 3 years to plan that. It was abrupt, it was sudden. And I think a lot of folks, even if they have tremendously successful exits, when I talk to them, it's the emotional side of this journey that's not often talked about. And the human side, beyond the dollars and the flashy headlines,
Mhm.
you are literally having to watch your brand live on, potentially go away altogether, your business, your team. It's an incredible hard thing, regardless of the dollar value, whether it's super positive, super negative. It is value is so much more than just the exit value itself. Wouldn't you agree?
I always say value is more than dollars and cents. And for a lot of business owners, it's time.
Yeah.
Um, and it can be flexibility. It can be, do I have to go into a job site? Do I have to travel for it? They're all things you can kind of negotiate in your contract. To go back to your original question, though, what I saw when I was doing M&A as an advisor, it wasn't talked about so much. It was typically congratulations on your close, and then you talk to the client, maybe 3 months down the line for one or two things, and then a year follow up, just to see how things are going. How's the transition? They're probably moving on to the next phase of life after business for them.
Yeah.
But it wasn't something so much talked about. There was often a lot of conversations around golf and lots of free time, but it wasn't really a core focus because at that point, an M&A advisor's job primarily is to sell the business. There is also some level of being like a psychologist as you go through that journey, um, but the life after business and the focus on what's next, the emotional side was not a component of that. And in my experience, it didn't really come up with business owners as something that they were focused on and looking towards.
And it's one of the biggest, A, financial decisions you're ever going to make, choosing to sell the asset that you've built. But B, it is also just this emotional psychology of the exit. And so you looked at this space as an M&A advisor. We had started to look at businesses. We'd moved to Muskoka. And so I'm curious, Matt, when you were thinking about what we were going to build next,
Mhm.
and you had brought this idea to me, this brand exit horizon and this concept from your own experience, having seen, the lack of preparedness and resources for for companies, for founders in Canada, especially,
Mhm.
um, that you turn to a few different resources to sort of start your thinking. Why do you think there is such a lack of information and transparency? And why is there also so much jargon? Like it's an interesting space as I've been getting into it from the advisory side. Why do you think that is? Why is this information so opaque and not nearly as open as it is to start a business, scale a business? Why is exiting and that phase of a business, which can be, as we've established, 2 to 3 years of your business building life,
Mhm.
why is that information not more easily accessible and digestible for founders?
Yeah, so I think there's only so many transactions that happen a year. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's not like tens of thousands in Canada or anything of that nature. And then when it comes down to it, you're talking about only a couple of professions that are really taking part in a sale process. You've got your M&A advisor, or if you're typically like sub $1 million in EBITDA, you might have like what's referred to as a business broker. You have your M&A lawyer, and oftentimes that lawyer is not just focused on M&A; they do like corporate law. And then you have accountants, and sometimes those are like focused on Q of E, or like private equity, but it's a small number of people who do that. And so it is often kind of a behind closed doors environment. And it's typically been when something happens, I go and I sell my company. I'm going to
Right.
an M&A advisor. I'm engaging because I want to sell my company. Although there are some who are, I want to start learning about the process, but typically it happens faster than most business owners anticipate of going through it. But it's having different advisors that are highly specialized. There isn't really a one-stop shop of how can we put everything together, and how do we find, everything from the right M&A advisor for your firm that has recent relevant experience? How do we find a, accountant who understands your business and can start, whether it's like a tax planning on the personal side, or like a strategic CFO type role for your business, the right lawyer for your business. Oftentimes, I would say that, if your regular lawyer that you work with for your business is probably not going to be your M&A lawyer, because you do want somebody who's highly specialized, and M&A deals get very nuanced in those transactions.
Yeah.
And then also on the personal side, like bringing the financial advisor into play and making sure, hey, we're going to be getting an 8, 9 figure, whatever the number is, amount of money. Let's make sure we have a plan for how we're going to deploy that capital. Is it one advisor? Or is it multiple? Is it family legacy? Do we have trust and estate planning done? Do I want to go with, more of like a family office approach for my funds to be managed? And so it's very disparate.
And this is a very long list. This is a big project.
It is a big project. It's a big project. There's a long to-do list to get all of this organized.
And is that something that you see as surprising to folks as they start the
Um,
process?
it's very complicated to get all of these pieces in order, right? And that's why it is hard. That's why there's not really that many firms doing all of this, outside of some of your like large firms. Your Deloittes and PwCs have a lot of this in house, but for most lower middle market businesses,
Which your business is 5 to 50 million in revenue, give or
definitions
take.
vary, but generally speaking, that's probably fair. Some might say sub $100 million in revenue. There just doesn't seem to be that level of advice that's out there for them, and it's often like a do-it-yourself journey. And there were numerous times when I was working with clients while doing M&A, and the lawyer and the accountant were meeting for the first time. They worked with the business owner for like
Mm.
20 years, and hey, nice to meet you. Oh, well, we've both worked with them for 20 years. That's interesting. And so part of what we want to do, especially on the advisory side, but also in the community, is getting business owners to start getting their advisors to speak together a lot more, and figuring out what that timeline looks like. Because to your point earlier, as soon as you have a deadline, like everyone likes to procrastinate, we all get that. But as soon as we have a deadline, and
Mm.
you're like, oh man, I've got 3 years to build value in my company. I've got 3 years to get my tax planning done. I've got 3 years to, plan my life after business, to get all my advisors in order. That goes by pretty quickly. Like that's 12 quarters.
Yeah.
That's not a long time.
3 annual cycles. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and it's not. And when you start doing that, it constrains your decision making. It forces you to make choices
Hmm.
and build a little bit more intentionally when the exit is the framework. Now, one of the things that when we were building, and we are husband and wife, so I'm curious about your perspective because you've seen my founder building years. We've been married 13 years as of yesterday.
Happy
Happy
anniversary.
anniversary. um, you know, you've seen the founder journey, you've seen the hard won lessons. And you were not, I don't think when we got married, you were like not setting out to go build a company.
No.
Here we are building a company, taking on the risk, bootstrapping this business, and it's going pretty well.
Hmm.
What has surprised you most about this journey
Has surprised me most about this journey.
so far?
I don't know if I've had any like major surprises. The highs are high and the lows are low is kind of how I have viewed the entrepreneurial journey. I think it's interesting working as a husband and wife team, and you got to implement some boundaries with that. And where do you talk about work and where don't you? Um, I don't know if I've found anything like abundantly surprising. There's a whole lot of little things. Like when you're starting your own business, all of a sudden there's no templates, there's no frameworks. There's you and a laptop and an empty Word document, and you get to sit there and put together a contract for somebody. And you're probably going to make some mistakes along the way, and that's okay because that's how you learn. That's how you get better. Um, and I think the most surprising thing for me really has just been how much the little things take up when you're starting from scratch. Everything from getting an NDA in place for somebody to figuring out your first contract for someone, your sales materials. Like how long did our first PowerPoint presentation take
Oh,
for our first pitch?
forever. And the one pagers that took like 50 hours or
Yeah.
whatever it was. And then you start to make choices, right? And figure out how to scale and peel some of those pieces back. But it's not an overnight
No.
success, and it is a lot of grind. And so having been through that yourself, now having helped sell businesses that were founded
Mhm.
by founders, and having that experience yourself, has that changed the way you look at M&A?
I think it reinforces my opinion that business owners deserve better outcomes. Because there's a heck of a lot more work that goes into building a company than I think I realized. Like it's obvious when you say it out loud, but
Yeah.
when you're starting to live it and you've had your 2 a.m. experiences of putting together your deck for a client the next morning, and making it all go off without a hitch, you start to appreciate it a lot more. And so, when we started this, interestingly enough, I had never been a founder or an entrepreneur. I had my Matt and Paul, my brother, we had a TV rental service when I was like 7 years old. We rented a TV with a cassette player, a VHS player to people. But outside of that, I have not been an entrepreneur. You
Yeah.
have been multiple times. And so it's been very enlightening for me. But wanting to start this business was to help business owners get better outcomes because there's multi generational wealth that's on the table here. And, you know, $10 million can be a very much a life changing amount of money for generations if you take care of it and you handle it well and make sure you have the right advisors in place. And so the amount of work that goes into creating that for a family, I appreciate now more than ever.
So if you were to say, here is one thing you should do today, just to understand kind of where you are in your journey, how prepared, how ready you might be, if your business is even saleable, what would you say to the founder that's listening?
Don't wait too long to think about it is the first piece. Going back to the start of this conversation and how there were events that drove decision making to sell a company. None of us expect those things to happen in our life. None of us want most of those things to happen in our life. The unfortunate reality is they do. And so have a plan uh, because it's just critically important to think through what is my exit, who's going to like one of the simplest things that we talk to business owners was having a contingency plan.
Yeah.
Um,
Written
and
down,
written down,
documented,
documented, key people
brutally
in your
painful.
business. Yep. It's not a fun exercise to go
Nope.
through. Um, but it's incredibly useful, right? And just to go through with this example for a minute, if you have a contingency plan of your key staff on your team, your executive leadership team, and somebody leaves, you've already got your plan written for what happens when they leave.
Your future
Um,
JD is written, your job description. You've got kind of all the components, all the knowledge and information and tooling.
and now you are putting a plan in action as opposed to reacting to something. And there's a lot of value in that, especially in the moment, because it's like, oh yeah, this isn't a problem. We've thought through that.
Yeah.
I think the same thing holds true for your business, right? Um, and so on top of just taking action and starting to plan, think about when is it you want to exit. And again, what does exit mean? Exit can mean a ton of different things. It can mean I'm entirely out of my business. It could mean I've sold off 70% of it and I'm holding 30%.
Yeah.
And some financial buyer is looking to 4x my business over the next few years. Like thinking, what is the optimal outcome I want and starting to put that plan into action and thinking through it and what is the timing. And then on the personal side, what's important to me? Because again, value is not just dollars and cents. It can be time. That can be time now. That can be time in the future. That can be time with kids. That can be legacy. That can be philanthropy. There's a whole lot of different components. And so I think just starting to think through what's important to me and when do I want that is really critical. And then again, going back to our conversation on, that exit timeline, all of a sudden, 2 years gets knocked off pretty quick. And you got to ask yourself the questions, am I ready?
Yeah.
If I were a buyer looking at my company, do I think that Matt could step away today and the business could keep running? Could I replace Matt tomorrow?
Yeah.
And there's not a huge ramp up process. And if you can't answer some of those questions truthfully, looking at yourself in the mirror, there's probably some work to do. And you want to start doing that now. Because at the end of the day, if your business isn't growing, it is dying. That is a harsh reality. And you need to make sure that you're staying on top of it. And one of the things that I saw time and time again when I was selling businesses is companies that had plateaued and were just kind of rolling for those 3 or 4 years. And my comment earlier on that hockey stick curve of growth that you could potentially have, again, you need to prove the value. People won't pay you for a hypothetical on a PowerPoint slide, as pretty as it might look. You got to prove the value and continue the growth of the business. Yeah. So don't take your eye off the ball.
Yeah. And so exit strategy truly becomes really business strategy, growth strategy. How do you continue to maximize both the financial performance of the business as well as strengthen some of those intangibles, things you don't see in QuickBooks, right? Like your processes, your people, et cetera, to move the multiple.
It is business strategy. And again, if our clients are listening, they might smile, is a business that's built to sell is built to last.
Yeah.
Is our firm belief, because the one where you can hand over the keys tomorrow and have a new owner do whatever they want with the company because it's theirs now, is the best version of your company. Because it has the people, it has the process, it has the technology, it's ready to go.
And so we are going to be wrapping up. And before we do, I would ask you this. We are committing to sharing our story out in the open. As we build our company to sell over the next several years, we're going to be sharing what we're learning, mistakes we're making, what positive things we're kind of putting in place. And a lot of that comes back to the Exit Horizon way and method of how we're sharing this process and bringing all of that knowledge together into one place that you can go to talk about exit, to learn, and to really grow, and to start applying that to your business to grow the business. And so I'm curious, is there anything, as you're thinking about our own journey going through this, that you're most looking forward to as we build together and as we share this out in the open?
Seeing business owners get really great results from exiting their business.
Yeah. I love that. It is an absolute honor to do what we're doing.
It is. It absolutely is.
So thank you for listening. That was a wrap of our episode. We'll be doing a few more short series like this and bringing more playbooks, tips, and tactics from Matt's M&A world experience, my operator brain, and pulling that together into content for you to help build more valuable generational businesses. Thanks for listening. This podcast brings you conversations with founders who've made strategic exits, plus the advisors who guided them through the entire journey, before, during, and after the deal. Real expertise from people who've actually been there. Getting to the Deal is made for the Exit Horizon community, a private, highly vetted membership for Canadian entrepreneurs planning strategic exits. We discuss what most won't, how to maximize value, build systematically, and design what comes next. Connect with us, Exit Horizon, on LinkedIn, or reach me at Krystyn@exithorizon.com. I'm Krystyn Harrison. Subscribe to Getting to the Deal wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you next week.